Now let us spread those feelings of spreading wellness around us. First, to those loved ones who are near us, who live nearby, who are in our community. May they be free of harm. May they be well. Let us also include those people, those who are in. Well, my comments today relate to the in-between, and that's our theme for the month. And there are so many in-betweens between one thing and another. And sometimes there's peace and openness and quiet in between, and many occasions to enjoy just that. But many times we also have to make decisions. Some of those can be terrible decisions, very hard decisions. Hopefully we may never have to make terrible decisions that affect other people's lives. But those are also made. How do people meet those moments? Let me begin today. Some of you know the time of this month, what it's about. Let me begin with the commemoration of a truly momentous moment, a momentous meet the moment time that happened in the month of August 70 years ago, and marked the moment in between World War and a time of peace. In Japan, August 15th, it was on Friday, just 2 days ago, is known as Shusen Kinenbi, and that means the day for mourning of war dead and praying for peace. In the United States and the United Kingdom, August 15th is referred to as in a more prosaic way. It is referred to as VJ Day, Victory in Japan, or VP Day, Victory in the Pacific. And it is not celebrated on August 15th. If it is at all, it's celebrated on September the 2nd, because that's when the agreements actually were signed. The announcement of Japan's surrender was made on August 15th, 1945. It was the first time in his reign as emperor that Emperor Hirohito spoke directly to the Japanese people. The very first time. He was always removed from the people, but not that day. And also not on the day when he had to proclaim the new constitution that was actually written mostly by Americans. I spoke of that some time ago when I mentioned Beate Sirota Gordon, who wrote a piece about women's rights. And when the emperor had to read that, his hands were shaking. I think she's the only one in the world who ever made his hands shake. But that's on the side. So how did we even get to that day? If you know history and you're a history buff and you like World War II history, the events that were leading up to that day were set in motion not really long before that. They began at the Yalta Conference in February 1945. So if you count the months, not much time in between. Terrible things happened in between. The United States made the decision to drop 2 atomic bombs on August 6th in Hiroshima and on August 9th in Nagasaki. And they were planning for a 3rd one if necessary. An estimated 250,000 people were killed, either instantaneously or soon thereafter. Upon hearing the news, the Germans who had surrendered some time before, they declared that the Japanese were wise enough, unlike the Germans themselves, to give up in a hopeless situation. Both the United States and Japan met the moment in their own way at that time, in the middle of August. The size of the human catastrophe at that time was very hard to grasp. And keep in mind also, if you're a history buff and you like data, it was preceded by the Battle of Okinawa on the southern end of Japan. And that battle, which didn't just take place in one day, but that battle led to more than 200,000 casualties, 117,000 on the Japanese side and 82,000 on the American side. And on the American side, it was only military, but on the Okinawan side, more than half of the civilians died. So again, staggering numbers. And those numbers were taken into account by the people who had to make the decisions. When do we resort to drastic actions? When do we surrender? So toning this all down to much more mundane events, when do we, as ordinary people, meet moments like that, or something that is momentous to us in our private lives, and realize something that is like these in-betweens, and what we do with them between times of essentially war and times of essentially peace? Well, in that conflict, if you want to give it a mild name, people were actually looking at data. How many people are we losing? How long is this going on? What is the narrative that's being told here? What were the facts, the data? And how can they be used in decision making? So let us keep this in mind. Meeting the moment that marks in-betweens, more often than not, requires using data, information, and contextualization. What do these data mean at this time for us? What is the narrative? What do we learn from it? So let's apply this notion and look at where our Unitarian Universalist congregations and communities are at in this moment. In June of each year, there is a huge General Assembly, and this year it was held in Baltimore, in person and also online. And in preparation for those kinds of conventions, a lot of data are being gathered. And the Beacon congregation is one of the communities that is under this umbrella of the Unitarian Universalist Association. So given their data, given our data, what does our near future look like? And can we meet the moment when needed? There's a person in the leadership of the Unitarian Universalist Association who I greatly admire. Her name is Sharon Horn. If you've ever heard her, you may know why. But I heard her give a speech, actually it was a sermon, at our regional meeting. I think it was in 2018, thereabouts, the spring. And spring 2018. And she was talking about this time when she and local organizers were organizing things like it was in Minnesota, so they were going to maybe boycott access to the Mall of America, But when she and the other organizer were driving, they were driving sort of in tandem with their cars, Sharon remembered that it's not a good idea to miss meetings and to just be told the bottom line. She was told the bottom line that she and the other organizer were going to be driving at the head of this group of cars to continue the protests. But they didn't stop at the Mall of America. They went on. And the Mall of America, you may know, is next to the airport. And she thought all of a sudden, oh my God, we're not blocking access to the Mall of America. We're blocking access to the airport. And she looked over at her partner in the other car. And she thought, I have to just get out of here because I have 2 little kids at home. What happens if I get arrested? Who is going to feed my children? So she had those thoughts running through her head. But then she was looking at her partner in the other car. And he was an African American. And she thought, if I get arrested, what are they going to do to him? I can't just leave him in a lurch. So she continued driving and leading that protest to block access to the airport in Minneapolis. That was quite a courageous thing. And I've always kept track of the sermons she gives, and she's just really great. And this time, she talked basically about data, where we are at in the Unitarian Universalist Association. So we are one of many congregations. And what does our future look like given what we're like in the moment? So at the annual meeting, Sharon Horan summarized the data. And of course data, okay, they're boring in a way, but they also tell us vital things, like what happened in the decisions that were made in 1945. In a nutshell, not much is happening. That may be a good thing. Not much is happening that is earth-shattering. Nevertheless, it's always necessary to set priorities in congregations, as you all know, so that we don't spread ourselves too thin. Oh, we should do this, we should do that, oh, it's great to do that, and then we end up not doing anything thoroughly. So we need to look at information. So what do the data tell us? And more importantly, what do they tell us in the context of our covenantal values and principles? So each year, and the leadership of this organization knows about that because you're filling out that paperwork, each year the Unitarian Universalist Association, our umbrella organization, asks its member congregations to submit responses to a questionnaire. And they were very open about sharing that information this year. There are many details in the findings, and if you're interested in details, there are going to be 2 online webinars, and they're scheduled for sometime in September and sometime in October. And I have all intention at this moment to sign up for them. They will be 96 minutes each, thereabouts, 90 minutes each. And they will look at the detailed data. But here's a brief summary. There are currently a little over 1,000 organizations, actually 1,076. There are member congregations and communities, and also some individuals. 994, so close to 1,000 of those, are member congregations. Overall, as you probably can guess, membership is down. It's down 15% from the peak that it had in 2015. So it's not down drastically, but it is down. And that is similar to mainstream Christian denominated churches. But for Unitarian Universalists, in the last 3 years, membership has been pretty much steady. So nothing earth-shattering there. It's good news in a way. An important part of the survey, and this is much closer to what's important to us, an important part of the responses is that 70% of the member organizations have fewer than 150 members. Beacon falls in that category. We're quite a bit fewer than 150. So we have about half of that number in membership. But the UUA sees 150 as a threshold. It's a threshold above which congregations can afford full-time professional ministry. That's not merely the minister, but it also is a religious education director, perhaps a full-time administrator, music professionals, ministers who specifically work with youth, and several others. And big congregations have all of those, many of them full-time. So 70% then of the member congregations cannot afford to have a full-time minister. What do? Some are lay-led, some have part-time ministers, part-time staff. Some share a minister with one or two other organizations. And yet, all of these are doing life-saving ministry, even though they don't have this full-time leadership. And what is the key here? Most of you know what that is. It's volunteer work. Volunteer capacity is key to sustaining these small communities in their ministries. As an example, our volunteer lay members and friends were very visible and active at yesterday's Pride Festival in Mount Clemens in Macomb County, which was so expertly organized by Joanne Heisel. You have no idea. I was going to say you have no idea unless you read her very long emails that were very explanatory. Thank you. And I mean that in only a positive way. So back to the annual survey. It also gathered data on all kinds of demographics. And for example, it found that 9% of the membership are now people of color who identify as such. And for staff members, that percentage is higher. So it's not as bad as it used to be. Also, 10 to 20% of the membership have a gender identity and or sexual orientation that is not mainstream. And Sharon Horgan said, and some of us more than others. And that adds to that diversity. If you know her, you know what she means. So that number is quite significant, and it's an important pillar of our spiritual community. And then when we look at children overall across these congregations, you will probably not be surprised that there is declining enrollment of children over the last decade. But here is the good news again. The enrollment numbers have stabilized in the last 3 years. So the last 3 years have been pretty good overall. What about financial sustenance? Well, you have received emails, mostly from our treasurer, in the last couple of months that tell you a lot about our congregation, and it's quite typical. Pledged units overall across these organizations have decreased by about 1/3 in the past decade, and that sounds bad. But on the bright side, the average pledges have increased by 43%. So there's an offset there. But even so, congregational pledging overall has not kept up with inflation. And that means that overall our budgets are shrinking. So fewer people are sharing a larger burden. And pledges are still overall a bit over 2/3 of congregational funding. But we are all, and Beacon is no exception, we're all finding more and more additional funding sources such as rentals of space, hosting special events, and so on. And here's another probably bright news. Congregational debt is way down. And I'm saying probably positive news because it means we're not taking on huge mortgages overall across these congregations. We're being more careful, maybe sharing more buildings with other churches or congregations, that sort of thing. And also, another piece of good news is that endowments as well as the reserves are up. Overall, and this looks like a huge amount of money, overall across all those member organizations, there is $1.2 billion. It's not directly accessible, but it's there for the long run as a security. Now, what do we do with all these data? We're quite typical. We're a vigorous congregation among those who are fewer than 150 members. So for us, meeting the moment might mean in part to continue the dedicated work as professionals and volunteers with hope, courage, and conviction as we tackle the upcoming church year. And another part is to remember that times can change if we change them. Let us not sit back and just see what's happening. Let us participate and change things. This suggestion I got out of the publication The Humanist, also published on August 15th. Times can change if we change. One of their big slogans in that issue. And specifically thinking about roles that humanists and Unitarian Universalists and others can play in doing our work and living our values within the current political climate, that same issue of the humanist also reminds us this, and I quote, "Fundamentalism promises purpose and security, yet it leaves people empty. And they fill those empty holes with rage," unquote. Unitarian Universalists fill those holes with hope. That's very different. And that is our work ahead. As they say, we are the faith that always shows up. It's always positive. So let us meet the moment by showing up for our spiritual journey in the coming months. And in the fall of 2025, we are invited to these themes. I'm just going to tell you the 4 for the fall, which we will follow for our own Sunday services also. Building belonging in September, cultivating compassion in October, nurturing gratitude in November, and in November we also have a commemorative service that helps us to nurture the gratitude we have for those in our lives who have passed. And then in December, choosing hope. So yes, may we choose hope in the months ahead, and may we make it so. After a few breaths, let us rise in body or spirit and sing our closing hymn. It is number 300 in the Grey Hymnal with